All right, folks, thanks for joining us tonight. We're just going to wait a few minutes as other folks jump on as we just started. We really got to get some sort of hold music. So again, thanks for joining us tonight. We're just going to wait a minute or two as other folks log in. Another minute. We have 70 people who have signed up for this, and we've got 24 on right now, so I'm just going to give it a second. All right, folks, welcome to community meeting number 1, our kickoff and design meeting for the Morrison Ave Flood Relief and Water Quality Improvement Project. First, I want you to know that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our project's website later this week, hopefully. This is a project that touches 3 wards, Ward 7, 6, and 5. Normally, our city councilors would be able to attend, but there is another meeting going on right at this exact same time, and they are needed there. But there will be future meetings and they will be there. Next slide, please. Our agenda for this evening is you're going to get to meet your city staff. You can see our 3 faces right now staring back at you. You'll also learn about our consultants, Kleinfelder and Dewberry. And then we'll just do a general meeting project introduction. We'll talk about the limits of the work as well as the schedule. We'll also kind of just go over the guiding principles of all construction in Somerville, what we look to obtain and achieve with the work, well as project goals, flood relief, stormwater, and CSO mitigation. This project also gives us opportunities for new stormwater, GSI, and streetscape improvements. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll have quite enough time for questions and answers. So if you want to just save your questions till then, not put them in the chat now and just save them, and we'll call on you as we go. Next slide, please. So you can see our 3 faces. Dan Amlin is the senior project manager for this project. Myself, I actually introduced myself, Jesse Moose, construction liaison and compliance manager, and Nick Galeckel, our construction public information officer. This team has been working together. Nick joined us 2 years ago. We're currently on our Spring Hill project where we spend a lot of time. But Dan and I have actually worked together for 6 years. This is our 3rd major project together. Our first one was the Somerville Ave Streetscape Improvement Project, and now we are currently on Spring Hill. The consultant team is Kleinfelder. You may know them from other projects. They're part of our lead service replacement program, as well as our Central Broadway water upgrade. And then Dewberry has been involved in our citywide drainage and CSO plan. Next slide, please. So we call this Morrison Ave, but it is much more than that. So Morrison Ave running from Cedar to College Ave, but also includes Winslow Ave, and then the community path from Willow to Grove Street. We also have Highland Road and Pearson Ave as offshoots of this project. Next slide, please. Then we head over to Ward 7, and we have J Street between Howard and Holland, and also Powder House and Packard up in the Tufts area. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Dan Amlin, our project manager.
Thank you, Jesse. Good evening, everyone. As Jesse introduced me, my name is Dan Amlin. I'm a senior project manager here with the City of Somerville Engineering Department. I've been here for 6 years and look forward to working on this project to better serve you all. So as Jesse just highlighted our project limits and project area, I'm going to start by speaking to the project schedule. So right now we are under contract with Kleinfelder and Dewberry. Our contract started last fall in October 2023. So between October 2023 and roughly September of this year, 2024, we are going to achieve a preliminary design for this project. Another year after that, through September 2025, we'll be reaching our final design, at which point we will be able to go out to bid with a hopeful construction start date anticipated for summer 2026 at the earliest. Right now, just to give kind of people an idea of what's been done to date, our consulting team, Kleinfelder and Dewberry, have been working on gathering survey data. We have field investigations underway. Some of you may have noticed we are looking for you to sign up for a building survey so we can get a better general understanding of what your internal plumbing looks like. And we have some utility investigations scheduled coming up soon. All these things will help kind of inform and be the foundation for this preliminary design. And next slide, please. So a lot of questions we tend to get over here in the engineering department is, what exactly are you designing? What information are you using to guide that design? So what we show here on this slide is a handful of different reports, tools, plans that we as a city have put together, and we kind of use these as our guiding principles and goals. So that being said, I know Jesse alluded to this earlier. I'm going to start with the citywide flood mitigation and water quality master plan that Dewberry was a part of. And I'm starting with this because this is perhaps one of the biggest factors in determining when to start this project. How do we tackle this project? How do we mitigate flooding, mitigate CSOs? So in 2022, the city completed this master plan. It included hydraulic model pipe refinements, flow calibration in every sewer shed in the city. And through this planning effort, and quite honestly, a lot of constituent feedback from people such as yourselves, we were able to identify 22 conceptual projects to reduce CSOs. And again, a big portion of that data in terms of how we prioritize these projects stems from residents who we encourage to reach out to the city when flooding does occur. So this is kind of an ongoing thing. Second to that is the Somerville Climate Forward. It's a comprehensive climate action plan that really sets an agenda of priority actions that stem from climate change mitigation and certain types of adaptation, right? So some key components include reducing greenhouse gases, mitigating and reducing flooding, mitigating and reducing extreme heat, and promoting equity. So within this Somerville Climate Forward plan, the key components we're looking at and we're considering during this design phase is updating stormwater management policies, stormwater management guidelines, things like improving bicycle infrastructure, assessing parking policies, parking supply, among other things. The next tool we have here is the Vision Zero Somerville, which is more related to streetscape than underground utility work. But as, again, Jesse mentioned earlier in the presentation here, as we kind of move through this evening's presentation, we'll be talking about opportunities for future streetscape improvements. So the Vision Zero is really a planning process aimed at reducing and eliminating transportation crashes, transportation fatalities, by really taking a multi-departmental approach, kind of focused on yearly data that we receive, with the goal of improving safety for all road users, pedestrians, cyclists, motorists, those who take public transit, buses, and the T, et cetera. In the majority of these goals, we achieve through altering, modifying, enhancing the roadway, the sidewalk, things like that. And then lastly, our urban forestry management plan, which was published in 2021, that really sets a course to expand and preserve the city's urban forest. For those of you who have traveled over to the Spring Hill neighborhood, while I do recognize it's under an awful lot of construction, it's not complete yet. With the use of this urban forest management plan, we're actually planting I believe it's 202 new trees. We removed about 25. So there's a really big push to enhance the urban canopy here in the city. Next slide, please. So what are the project goals from Morrison Ave, this corridor, side streets. And we're trying to make it simple right now, right? It's drainage improvements, flood mitigation. I'm also going to include CSO reduction in number 1 here. The second piece is incorporating green stormwater infrastructure, which we will talk about shortly. And the third is streetscape safety improvements, which I just made some mention to, and one of our colleagues here at Kleinfelder, Artie Bonney, is going to be speaking about that here in a little bit. Next slide. So starting with drainage improvements and flood mitigation. For those of you who are unaware, I would think by now maybe a lot of you are aware, a lot of the city's infrastructure was constructed 100 years ago, late 1800s, early 1900s. And in that period of time, that era, it was very common to install combined sewers, which means one pipe for both sanitary flows and stormwater flows. With some of these other large-scale infrastructure projects, Somerville Ave, Spring Hill, the Poplar Street Pump Station, is an overarching goal to separate combined sewers and have dedicated stormwater pipes. In most cases, all of our combined sewer system ends up traveling to the MWRA's wastewater treatment plant over at Deer Island. Because the pipes are combined, the treatment costs that the city pays are higher than if we were to separate those flows entirely, right? One sanitary flow, one stormwater flow. And when we have, I know I mentioned this on the last 2 slides ago when we were talking about some of our guiding principles, we want to be able to manage our stormwater better, to reduce flooding, to reduce CSOs. And for those who are unaware, a CSO is a combined sewer overflow, which means because we have stormwater and sanitary in the same pipe, when we receive high intensity, short duration rainfalls, say you get 1 inch of rain in an hour, that's enough stormwater to inundate our system. Most of the time it's because our pipes aren't large enough. Our pipes are in very poor condition because of their age. In this general area, it's a combination of topography and some of the underlying soils, mostly clay, that kind of promote flooding. When we receive when a CSO occurs, what that means here in kind of the second graphic above the text, the system can only handle so much. The pipes are only so big in diameter. And when it starts to back up, we end up with situations where some of our sanitary flow mixed with stormwater flow enters a natural body of water. I believe Somerville has 2 CSO locations, the Alewife Brook and the Mystic River. And one of our overarching goals is to reduce that happening, right? It's not a pretty sight. It's certainly not something we want to see happen, but kind of given the environment, given the higher frequency of these heavy rain events, heavy wet weather events, a CSO is more likely to happen. So again, back to the project, through a combination of different tools that we have, which we'll get to in a minute, our goal is to reduce the number of CSOs that are occurring year after year. Next slide, please. So how we got here. This is a really great graphic that's actually taken from the citywide drainage and water quality master plan that highlights all the areas prone to flooding throughout the city. So all the areas that you see in blue, most of them are labeled with certain streets, certain intersections, areas of town. They were identified with the hydraulic model, and the root cause analysis of flooding in each area was identified. And we do want to make note that, you know, it's one thing to have a hydraulic model, but part of what created this map is hearing from residents, recurring flooding, basements backing up, etc. So using this map, we were able to kind of prioritize, you know, what areas do we tackle first? And if you look in the bottom right-hand corner there, you'll see a lot of blue, a lot of flooding around the Union Square area, a little bit over by Interbelt, which is where Somerville Ave utility and streetscape project took place. So that was a project aimed at, we installed a 14x6, 6-foot tall box culvert to act as stormwater storage. So we're not inundating the system. We're not causing backups further upstream as we get into Spring Hill and points further west, such as Morrison. So some of those projects have been completed. Some of those projects starting, over to the east are ongoing, and we're methodically working our way west to the Davis Square area over to Arlington, working our way upstream to mitigate a lot of these flooding issues. And of course, city budget has a play here. Luckily, we have the money to fund this project, and we're going to proceed with constructing a whole slew of drainage, stormwater, sanitary improvements to minimize these issues. Next slide, please. So I mentioned this earlier. What tools do we have available? And this is kind of a comprehensive table that shows, exactly what we can do in this neighborhood to help solve these problems. Some are obviously more costly than others. Some are more effective than others. Kind of starting at the top, going down, I won't read everything on this slide, but we plan to increase pipe sizes. So we have small diameter pipes. The capacity gets filled up very quickly when we get a heavy rain in a short period of time. So by making those pipes bigger, they can convey more flows without surcharging the pipe, overflowing, popping out of manholes, going into your basement, etc. Similarly, installing new catch basins, expanding our drainage system, trying to capture more of that surface runoff. We'll be installing new pipes. We'll be separating sewers. We do have some green infrastructure slated to be constructed under this project. And while it's somewhat effective, it certainly has its challenges. It has a lot of benefits too. And we can get into that in a little bit. And lastly, stormwater storage. Like I mentioned, on Somerville Ave, we have a giant, basically, stormwater storage tank that holds that stormwater and slowly lets it trickle out, so we're not overwhelming our drainage system, which truthfully is similar to what we're looking here on Morrison Ave proper, some type of stormwater inline storage tank to help alleviate the stresses that these pipes are seeing at each of these wet weather events. Next slide. So we like this graphic because it kind of shows everything we just talked about, right? A little bit of everything. So you'll see we have separated sewers. We have infiltration, inflow mitigation. A lot of that can be achieved by green stormwater infrastructure. We do have green stormwater infrastructure, and some examples, and our colleague Artie is going to get into this in a little bit, but bioretention basins, subsurface infiltration trenches, stormwater tree trenches, all these types of tools that we can use together in a big combination to really tackle these issues without sacrificing quality, without sacrificing efficiency of how these systems will work. In the bottom left, you'll see there's stormwater storage tanks. I just mentioned, on Morrison Ave proper, we're looking to install an inline storage tank itself. And the one thing I do want to note here, we are not creating any new stormwater discharges. I believe right now, the Morrison Ave neighborhood and surrounding streets, when we do receive a CSO, it actually is being dumped into the Alewife Brook. So by separating these sewers, by upsizing these pipes, we can eliminate, or I don't want to say eliminate, minimize the amount of sanitary flows that are being emptied and really try to increase just the stormwater flows. So this is a really nice graphic that kind of shows how all these different tools work together to achieve one goal. Next slide. So this is something I mentioned earlier, and this is an effort being led by Kleinfelder and Dewberry. For many of you in the neighborhood, I'm sure you've received a flyer of some sort or a CTY call or some communications here from the city and this project team that we're looking to schedule a home plumbing survey. The purpose of this survey is to really just confirm connections between your private property and our infrastructure, our sanitary sewer systems, our drainage systems. We want to identify surface drainage locations. What all this means is we're pulling this information no one's going to get in trouble if you sign up. First and foremost, we encourage you to sign up because it will help drive this design. It will help us be able to design a better product that will serve you and your neighbors longer, essentially. And because we want you to sign up, we've actually included a QR code in the bottom right. There is a list of addresses on our project webpage. That QR code will bring you right to our project webpage. And there's an update there that says we want you to sign up for this survey to help, guide our design. You can click that. There's a link to addresses. They're very specific. Most, if not all, directly abut the project limits. But through that link, you can sign up. There's certain dates, times available, whatever works best for you. But we really encourage you to sign up. Let us know. We want to come and perform this survey just to help gather information so we can understand, what are your plumbing systems like? Where are they connected to in the street? What other issues are you dealing with? That'll give us the ability to ask ourselves, okay, how do we solve this and continue this design on through next year? Next slide, please. So in talking about what tools we have available, Kleinfelder put these wonderful graphics together for us. And it really shows, we'll kind of overlaid on our project limits here. What are we looking to do? So on Morrison Ave, we're looking to build new stormwater drains, an inline storage tank. We want to increase the diameter of our combined sewers. We want to rehabilitate any aging, broken, dilapidated sewer pipes, drain pipes, manholes, and really kind of bring these into this century here. Highland Road, Pearson Ave, more of the same thing. Obviously, Pearson Ave has a much longer reach in terms of where we're looking to continue with this design. But again, we're trying to upsize those small diameter pipes, make them bigger, and repair, rehabilitate, replace any existing pipes and manholes. Depending on what the condition is, depending on what the age, it is going to dictate, can we repair this or do we need to replace it? Next slide, please. So again, this is kind of showing the west side of Somerville Ave over by Winslow Grove and the community path. So a little bit more of the same. We want to build a whole bunch of new stormwater drains. We want to put in new drainage, put in new pipes, and really try to capture a lot of that localized flooding that I'm sure many of you have been experiencing. Next slide. And lastly, we have J Street, Powder House, and Packard. Not so much in the immediate Morrison Ave vicinity, but the pipes are all connected nonetheless. So this project again is providing an opportunity to analyze these streets, analyze the condition of our infrastructure underneath the roadway, and what we found is more or less a desire to increase those pipe diameters, rehabilitate, repair, fix any of those aging, crumbling pipes that are likely from 100 years ago. And I don't know if I mentioned J Street, but we'll be doing the same thing on J Street. So these are all really great graphics to give you all this evening just an initial idea of what we're looking to achieve through this design process and future construction. Next slide, please. And because this meeting is being recorded and it will be posted on our webpage, so if you'd like to come back, refer to this later, this slide basically summarizes everything I just said. It's handy to have the map, but when you kind of look holistically at the project, this slide kind of encapsulates everything and everything that we want to achieve, right? So you can see on the left-hand column, neighborhood streets, Morrison Ave, Grove, Winslow, Highland Road, Pearson Ave, and the community path. On the right-hand side is some of those other streets here further away, Packard Ave, Powder House, and J Street. So this slide is here for your reference. If you want to come visit our city project webpage, we'll have this whole presentation online. You can come back, you can look at this slide, and you can understand exactly what we're looking to achieve. And with that, I'm actually going to pass it over to our colleague, Artie Bonney. Artie is our colleague from Kleinfelder, and he's going to be speaking to you about green stormwater infrastructure opportunities and streetscape improvement opportunities. Artie, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. Again, my name is Artie Bonnie with Kleinfelder. I have 20 years experience as transportation engineer and with civil engineering projects, specializing in streetscape reconstruction and planning. So today I'm going to talk about some of the green stormwater infrastructure opportunities that we foresee in this localized area, as well as exploring some of the streetscape opportunities as well, and give you an update on some of the existing conditions that we've performed already. So to get right into the green stormwater infrastructure, what is green stormwater infrastructure? It's a nature-based approach to manage stormwater, reduce heat stress, reducing that urban heat island effect, and increasing biodiversity. Plants and trees filter and absorb the stormwater and help improve overall the quality of surrounding waterways. The unique thing about green infrastructure is that it can be above and below ground. So we have some above ground examples, and I can talk through a below ground example as well. So for above ground, we can have bioretention, which can be installed at curb extensions and allows for green vegetation to be placed in the roadway pavement, if you will, and infiltrate stormwater that gets captured through cuts in the curb. We can also look at planted areas, so enhancing greenscape at intersections, increasing trees, so increasing the urban canopy, as well as managing and supporting the existing trees that are there. Large trees that are mature have a lot of value in providing shade and protection in the streetscape environment. Next slide, please. So when we talk about green stormwater infrastructure, right now our team is looking holistically at the neighborhood in general and calculating and observing how the flow patterns occur. Green stormwater infrastructure, we want to be able to capture drainage throughout the watershed itself. So we're not looking just at the street along Morrison Avenue. We are looking within the neighborhood context. So we're looking for downstream locations where stormwater runoff will travel. We look to implement as potential areas where flat roadway sections where the stormwater collects. So that's where you see ponding on your street. And then also we want to look for areas that are free from underground utility conflicts because these practices have subsurface aspects to them. And so we don't want to get into the underground utilities. And so that's part of our screening process. So it's a fairly preliminary process that we're at right now, and we'll continue to refine that as the design progresses. But what we're really interested in, what we're really excited about is to look at areas that are compatible with the streetscape itself. So we're looking for a holistic integrated solution where the green stormwater infrastructure practice is not designed by itself in a silo, but that it's integrated into the streetscape. So for instance, you could envision that at this corner, there may be an opportunity to install green stormwater infrastructure with a curb extension at the end of the side street meeting Morrison Avenue. So these are just some of the things that we're starting to look at. Next slide, please. So I talked about green stormwater infrastructure intersecting with the streetscape opportunities. I'm just going to take a walk back and talk about some of the existing conditions on Morrison Avenue and what our team has observed so far. So our team has gone out to Morrison Avenue. We've walked the site. We've observed traffic operations and patterns. And we've also taken a keen eye to the quality and condition of existing infrastructure. The sidewalks, are they spalling? Are they cracked? Our ADA ramps, are they compliant? Are they missing a detectable warning panel? Like in the bottom left, you can see there isn't a detectable warning panel. And then in the bottom right, you can see pavement damage. So we're also assessing the level of damage or to the street itself, to the roadway pavement. This project presents an opportunity to reconstruct the street, and so we want to get a good idea of the existing conditions along that street. We're also looking at areas along the sidewalk where there are existing tree pits, and the sidewalk is more narrowed in that location. So you may observe this as you're walking down or rolling down Morrison Avenue, two people abreast, and you come to a tree pit that one person has to walk ahead of the other. And so we'll be looking to restore a wider sidewalk condition as we continue to evolve the design process for Morrison Avenue. Next slide, please. So our team looked at not only the existing physical conditions, but also the conditions for traffic operations and the way in which the elements of traffic safety within the street itself. So one of the first things we looked at was the opportunity for pedestrians to cross the street. So people living in Powder House neighborhood, Morrison Avenue serves as a minor barrier to connectivity to the Somerville community path. So connecting from north to south is really important. And so we looked at the frequency of pedestrian crossing opportunities through marked crosswalks. And those are marked out here on the screen. But what I want you to pay attention to is on the west side on Morrison Avenue, heading towards College Ave, that for a span of 1,200 feet, there are no crosswalks whatsoever. So there's no opportunity to cross Morrison Avenue at these locations. And so we're going to start to look at the feasibility of implementing a crosswalk at Grove Street to allow for connections to the community path across Morrison Avenue. As well, in a less lengthy span between crossings, there is an area between Rogers Ave and Josephine Ave that we're going to look to evaluate as well. So that's an area just to the immediate east of Willow. Next slide, please. So we looked into the traffic safety within the area, and today I'm going to talk about the vehicle speeds along Morrison Avenue. And in future presentations, we'll talk more about the traffic safety information that we're getting back through our initial investigations and how our project will look to address some of those things. But I want to concentrate here on vehicle speeds. And so we placed 3 counters down on Morrison Avenue, and these counters are able to calculate vehicle speed in either direction. So we were able to calculate vehicle speed heading westbound and eastbound. What I want to bring up is that Morrison Avenue over the past few years initially was identified as an area of high-speed risk. And so to bring that speed target down to 20 miles per hour, there have been a series of implementations, each one becoming more physically capital intensive as an infrastructure implementation. So first we started with raised flex posts, narrowing the roadway corridor to slow down speeds. And recently in 2023, raised pavement humps were placed on Morrison Avenue that changed the speed profile of the street. So a lot of drivers are now selecting speeds that are much lower than they were before because of these implementations. And so our project will continue to evolve this process. So the 3 counters determine the number of vehicles that exceed 20 miles per hour. And that's that's our area of focus, are vehicles that are exceeding the speed limit. Next slide, please. So we have a series of slides that talk about the actual data that we've collected here for speed along Morrison Avenue. And so I'll spend some time on this first slide, and then the other 3 slides I'll move through a little bit faster. So this first slide indicates that it's a data collector that we had on the east side of Morrison Avenue. So I'm going to talk about 2 collection points, one on the far east, one on the far west. So this one's on the far east. And you can see that the arrow in the image points to vehicles heading eastbound. And what this graph shows is it shows the number of vehicles on the y-axis, and on the x-axis, it shows the time of day. So we can see the number of vehicles at each timestamp. So you can see that there are much fewer vehicles from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. And then that volume increases throughout the day. And the green squares at the top, 20 to 25 miles per hour, that indicates the number of vehicles that are exceeding the speed limit. So for instance, at 6 a.m., we see that there between 6 and 7 a.m. that there are 4 vehicles out of the 18 counted for that hour that are exceeding the speed limit. So we're looking to, what we're seeing in this data right now is that speeds are managed fairly well. There's always an opportunity to do more, but currently the street is operating very well in managing speed. And I do want to share that the speed data was collected on December 6th and 7th. So the roadway conditions were fair. And so this is a good representation of the speeds that were observed on Morrison Avenue. Next slide, please. One thing I did not mention is that the speed data where we are collecting these speeds, this is where previous speed data was collected. So we're going to be able to do an apples to apples comparison to the when we do a follow-up study with the implementation of the project, and to see how these speeds have changed over time. So right now, this is the far east speed data collector, but now we're looking at westbound. You can see that there are just more vehicles overall, but similar percentage of speed violators. So we kind of have a fairly consistent number of vehicles that are exceeding the speed limit as a percentage. Next slide, please. So now we're moving all the way to the far west. So this is at Grove Street, heading to College Ave, if you were heading to College Ave along Morrison. And in this direction, we're looking at eastbound. And in eastbound, again, we have fairly well-managed speeds throughout the project, throughout the duration of the day. Kate, next slide, please. And then similarly, going in the other direction, same thing, we have around the same percentage of managed speeds throughout. So overall, this shows a fairly consistent speed management profile. Next slide, please. So knowing that about speeds and that how this program's working right now, that gives us an opportunity to take a look at other ways that we can enhance the streetscape to continue to promote the speed management strategy that's been successful to date, and to modify some of the implementations to coordinate other aspects of street safety, connectivity, and enhancement of the pedestrian network. So what we're seeing here are the existing speed humps. And then if we move over to the top right, there are curb extensions that allow for an increase in sight distance for people crossing the street and for vehicles approaching. And you can see that there are opportunities to install green infrastructure as well within these implementations. So we'll be looking at that. And then on the bottom left, we're looking at raised crosswalks. So this might be at a mid-block crossing opportunity. So this is taking that speed hump and formalizing it as a raised crosswalk. And then lastly, we can look at raised intersections. So there's a strong desire line along Highland Road to connect to the community path and to the amenities immediately adjacent there. And so we could envision a potential, we'll be evaluating and looking further into this raised intersection that could be implemented at that location or another location as well. And the beauty of raised intersections is that they create a sense of place. And so not only does it afford speed management, but it helps really reinforce the character and the place within that context. So again, these are potential things that we're looking at as we continue to evolve the planning part of this project, and we'll continue to look at further opportunities along the corridor. With that, I just want to say, we're really excited to be working with the city of Somerville and to be supporting the neighborhood in looking at new opportunities for Morrison Avenue. And so for that, now I'm going to pass it on to Jesse.
Thank you, Artie. That was a great, some information on speed data as well as GSI opportunities. This is the contact information for myself, Dan, and Nick. The best way to actually interact with us is to email all three of us at the same time. It's an easy way to do it. The website is right below it. That QR code will take you there as well. We have, this is a kickoff meeting. We have many more opportunities. We want to meet with the residents and kind of get feedback as we go forward. This meeting currently has 41 people in it. I'm sure there are much more people who live on Morrison Ave and surrounding areas who want to have a say in this. So look for upcoming in-person workshops in June and beyond. And with that, we are going to transition to our question and answer period. So what I'd like to do, I see there have been some questions in the chat. I like having conversations. So I prefer that folks raise their hand. Nick will unmute you, and then we will have a conversation about your questions. So with that, Nick, who do we have up first?
First up, we have Stephanie. Stephanie, I'm gonna ask you to unmute now.
Hi, Stephanie. How are you? Stephanie? Stephanie, you there? All right. Why don't we go to the next person? Let's talk to Anne. Hi, Anne. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And actually, I go by Toby, but this is typical. This is fine. I live on Winslow Avenue, and I have two questions that are not actually related. One of them is in reference to the tree pits narrowing the sidewalk. At that, and the solution there is to widen the sidewalk. Are you envisioning taking the trees down in order to widen the sidewalk? And could we prevail upon you to think of another solution?
Sure. That's a great question. As Dan talked about with our Spring Hill project, we did have to do some tree removals, but then there was a net positive of what we're actually planting. When we are looking at existing trees, I think we also will look at ways that maybe the sidewalk could be extended around the tree in some cases, but it really is case by case.
Okay, so the other thing is that I live on Winslow Avenue, and I'm curious, I love the idea of increasing the size and condition of the pipes in our street because we have backup from the street into our basement, which is a little unnerving. However, we're on the downside. So as you know, obviously from Morrison down to us, everything drains down into Winslow, and same thing for the bike path. So my question is, how does increasing the pipe size along Winslow solve the backup problem? Won't it? Where does it go from Winslow? Because it seems as though we're the bottom of the barrel.
Sure. Dan, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Yep. So the key component I want you to remember is we're talking about putting an inline storage tank underneath Morrison Ave. think of, you know, a giant rectangular tube that's going to hold that water. So what that will, in theory, do is any of the flows coming down from, say, Liberty, Foskett, Appleton, anything that's going to cross Morrison Ave and end up down at Winslow, by installing a series of new drains, new drain pipes, new catch basin structures and things like that that are going to connect to this big storage tank, it's going to capture a lot of those flows coming down the hill towards Winslow Avenue. So that by being able to capture a lot of that surface runoff that would otherwise, and probably still to this day, make it to your home and back into your basement, we can capture that water, store it in a tank, allow it to slowly drain out. And by increasing the pipe sizes on Winslow, by increasing and installing new pipes under the community path, we can then work to redirect that stormwater runoff, either by having it redirected back to the tank, which is obviously a challenge given the topography, or by increasing these pipes, we'll be able to capture more of these flows in the pipe itself that travel more or less down to Union Square out towards McGrath Highway, where it eventually connects to the MWRA system.
Great, thank you.
And I will just add really quickly, we know there's a lot of very mature trees in this neighborhood. The last thing we want to do is remove any. So we're going to look at and consider a slew of options, like Jesse mentioned, bumping out the sidewalk around an existing tree, taking up some of that real estate from the roadway to maintain ADA compliance, make sure our sidewalk width is enough, but also maintaining the health and longevity of each of these mature trees.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Toby. Let's move on to Mark Batts. We have 2 Marks in the chat.
Mark, you should be able to go ahead and unmute.
Hello, I live on Pritchard, and I guess my main comment is I've spent a lot of time on the city of Somerville's city-wide drainage and water quality master plan site, looking at the wonderful reports that have been prepared there, and they are wonderful, and I encourage anyone to go look at them. I think we are talking about Sewershed CA right now, and I've spent a lot of time looking at the report for Sewershed CA, which I think was from 2022. And generally, I'm wondering to what extent those reports reflect the current most up-to-date plan, and specifically, the report on Sewershed CA presents sort of 2 options, option 1 and option 2, and talks about option 2 being a complete sewer separation and repurposing part of half of the Tannery Brook conduit to completely separate the sewer all the way to Elway Brook, and option 1, which is not doing that. So I wonder where we stand on that and what if that relates directly to what we're talking about right now.
Sure. Thank you, Mark. To be as transparent and honest as possible, we are so early in this design that none of this has been solidified and confirmed as, you know, are we touching Pritchard or are we not? We have the opportunity, especially in Project CA, I think it's 1.1 if I'm not mistaken, that Morrison Ave area does show Pritchard Ave as being part of this project. The reason we're not showing it here this evening is because when we look at the hydraulic modeling, excuse me, Pearson Ave is taking the brunt of this flooding, and some of that is by virtue extending over to Pritchard Ave. But I do want you to know that part of this initial design, right, we're roughly 6 months in to our preliminary design. We have the opportunity, we've have the opportunity to do survey. We have the opportunity to come back, look at Pritchard Ave, look at the utilities underneath. Do we need to separate storm and sanitary? And really, I mean, we're at the point in time where, nothing is arbitrary. However, we are able to kind of look at some of these surrounding streets, look at some of these areas, determine, I guess, feasibility. Can we accommodate some of these additional streets, in kind of the bigger neighborhood into this project? B, do we have funding for that? And that's always a key component. And C, what type of improvements can we make that are going to have a lasting, beneficial effect?
Yeah, just to touch on that. So Dan and I do mostly construction meetings, also with Nick, and then we're working off a map that is very much set in stone. This is the project, it has been defined. This is what we've hired a contractor to do. We're in design. So if we go back and talk with Dewberry, talk to Kleinfeld, and we see that we need to talk about Pritchard or other, streets surrounding, when we meet again, there might be a different map that we'll be showing you.
Yeah. Again, my main concern isn't really about my street or myself in particular. It's just interest in the dichotomy presented in the Sewershed CA report, whether that is, an actual dichotomy that will go one way or the other, or if it's a menu of things that might be done. And it sounds like probably the answer is no, a decision has not been made one way or the other.
Correct. Yeah. Decision hasn't been made yet. We're too early in the process to really have any definitive decisions made at this point. I tend to lean more towards this is going to be kind of a suite of different tools and different methods to achieve what we're looking to achieve with flood mitigation. It's not going to be any one specific activity, I guess, in terms of sewer separation. It's separating sewers, increasing sizes, replacing and installing new drains, putting in a tank. It's an extensive menu that, we're fortunate to be with Kleinfelder and Dewberry because they are going to help us determine which of these tools can we use, what will be most effective, what will be most cost effective, and how do we merge them all together. Does that answer your question, Mark?
Yeah, it does. And if I could have one more comment, I just encourage people to go look at those reports on the citywide drainage and water quality master plan. They are detailed and interesting, and they have photos and maps and lots of good information.
Some of which we've used for our presentation.
Yes.
So yes, thank you for the plug, Mark. That's great.
Shout out to Dewberry. Thank you, Mark. Next up is Stephanie again. Let's see if technology does a little better this time.
Stephanie, you should be able to go ahead and unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. Well, I wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much for this presentation. I'm so excited for this project to make Alewife Brook cleaner. I'm excited for the green infrastructure on Morrison. I'm excited for the traffic calming, the ADA compliance. All of this is wonderful, so thank you. There are a couple things that I wanted to highlight. So the first is that there's no plan for the community path east of Willow. But there's actually a huge amount of flooding there, and it's because the city permits at least one household to discharge its sump pump onto the community path. This creates a big puddle, and when there's a lot of rain, that puddle trickles across the brick circle near Lexington Park, and then it creates a huge mud puddle at the entrance to the community path in front of the Purple House, and then trickles out where it finally finds a drainage on Morrison. If the temperature dips below freezing, this all turns to ice. So I would really encourage you to include the east side of the community path for the stormwater drainage. There's also puddles further, so the part I'm describing is like just east of Lexington Park, but there are puddles west of that as well that are still east of Willow. So hopefully you got all of that. The second thing is, and so I just will give you a chance to respond. Is that something that's on your radar?
It's on our radar. I mean, quite honestly, Stephanie, one of the areas that seems to flood the most is right at the bottom of Highland Road there, especially that kind of little section south of Morrison in front of Lexington Park where you described.
Yeah.
Our hydraulic modeling shows that area as being very, very prone to flooding. So again, while no decisions have been made, we don't really have a design to show you folks yet, but we do have the ability to go revisit this area. Bottom of Highland Road, that section of the community path between Willow and Cedar, and determine, what are our options, what are our abilities? What are our opportunities here? And how do we tackle this flooding as best we can, given the budget we have?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's just not on your map currently. And then the intersection at Highland and Morrison, you mentioned might have a raised table. I really support that. Another thing that you could consider is a small rotary. And there's quite a bit of speeding on Highland Road. Sorry if I said Highland Ave a second ago, I meant Highland Road. A third thing is that I wanted to let you know that Harvard, the urban planning department, is currently doing a project with the Brown School to map how children walk to school in this neighborhood. And a lot of children cross from Morrison to Highland Road. So if you want to connect up with them, they could tell you a lot about how the kids are getting around in this area, which is pretty cool. And then the last thing that I wanted to say is that I really like curb extensions. Those are all my notes.
That's fantastic. Yeah, thank you. And at least I'll speak to the Brown School. So we have a list of certain stakeholders that, we collaborate with, we coordinate with, we seek their input for the design. The Brown School is on that list. Some other stakeholder groups, just a few off the top of my head. It's the Pedestrian Transit.
PTAC.
Yeah, I forget what the A stands for.
Advisory Committee.
Advisory, thank you. Yeah. Somerville Bike Committee is another one. But yeah, knowing, not too far away from the limits of this project is a school. We definitely have the Brown School listed on here to understand just that, pickups, drop-offs, what are the schedules, the routing. So that's great feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's also something we'll keep in mind when construction actually begins, because we want to make sure that we're not impacting kids' route to school or, doing as little as possible. Why that is happening. Well, thank you, Stephanie. Up next, we have Colleen Kelly. Hi, Colleen.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
All right. So I heard you say earlier that in terms of widening the sidewalks and potentially removing trees, you're going to focus on, any other option possible. What about protecting the roots of the really large mature trees that are on Morrison, like by Grove and Clifton?
So all construction, if you go to our Spring Hill project right now, you'll see tree protection around each tree. That is
I don't mean the
that,
trunks, I mean the roots.
The
so
roots.
there are, the oldest tree in Somerville is right by Grove. Those roots probably go right into the street under the asphalt. Like,
okay,
how
so
are we going to protect those roots so that those trees don't come down later on?
Always a challenge, especially doing any sort of infrastructure upgrade next to a mature tree. We typically in construction, and the same will be the case for this design. We on the city side, we have a team of urban foresters. We typically look to certified arborists. There's different industry techniques. I don't know if you've heard of a Silva cell before. It's kind of like an underground Lego system that basically creates a corridor for a new pipe, but promotes more vertical tree root growth downward instead of outward. So we don't have sidewalks upheaving and things like that. So it's certainly a challenge. I don't have a definitive answer for you right now, Colleen, in terms of what we're planning to do. Because again, this is just meeting number one out of a 2-year design process, but certainly, we want to avoid having to errantly cut roots that are, indefinitely going to harm a tree and possibly kill a tree 2 years down the line, 5 years down the line. So what we're going to have to do is kind of understand what are the extents of these root systems. How is that going to interact with the pipes in storage tank we want to put in the ground, and come up with some really creative ways to preserve both the tree while we achieve our goal at the same time. So I would say my final note here is please come back when we're our next public meeting. This is a good thing to keep reminding us about. We certainly won't forget, but public support is always welcome.
And are you, I mean, I think that's something to definitely take into consideration when you consider the location of storage tanks that would be much wider than, there are places where there aren't tree roots probably. Are you working with Somerville Urban Forestry on this, or also working with other certified, I'm sorry, what did you say? Arborists, yes.
So to start, what we plan to do, I guess, in kind of thinking of our project schedule, we're going to put together a very preliminary conceptual design. That does get circulated amongst city staff. Urban forestry, public space and urban forestry is one department that will review that. And chances are, our senior urban planner is a woman named Vanessa Bukili. She's got a PhD. She's going to look at that and say, you can do this, you can't do that. Here's your limitations based on this species of tree. Which I'm not going to speak to because I'm certainly not an expert, but we do have experts on staff in the city that can help us enhance and improve our design to try to maintain the life and longevity of each of these mature trees.
And that will include private trees or just the city trees on the sidewalk?
Typically, it's just city trees on the sidewalk.
Okay, so what about the private trees that are just on the other side of the sidewalk?
You mean like
the biggest
private
tree in
property?
Somerville? Yes, so the largest tree in Somerville is right on Morrison Ave, and it is on the very edge of someone's property on the sidewalk.
Oh, I'm
but
sorry.
Not
I
on city
misunderstood.
property.
I'm thinking you're asking about a tree in someone's backyard. If it's right up against the right of way and the roots are going to be an issue, it's going to be the same thing, but with an extra step of having to speak with and coordinate with and collaborate with the homeowner.
Okay.
So what's that? Do you know what address that is? Just for our records.
I don't know what address it is. Sorry, that's not my home, but I live at the corner of Clifton and Morrison, and I have several very large trees on our property, and that's 9 Clifton Street.
Okay.
Jesse, I'm tempted to say it's on the west side there.
It's at the
211?
end of Grove almost, maybe across from the B&B.
Yep. I know what you're talking about. I know that tree.
Yeah.
It's a big tree.
Has a plaque on it and everything.
Yep.
Mario, thank you, Colleen. Up next is Ed. Thanks for waiting.
Thanks very much. Great. My question, we live on Winslow, and it's a 6-unit building, and across diagonally from us is maybe a 10 or 12 unit building, and across from us is a series of houses that are connected by common walls. My question is, we'd like to put in EVs and electrify some of our material here and move off of gas, but we don't have the amount of electrical service we need. Is there any planning to allow, we don't have room on our lot itself to put in a transformer, given the requirements that are imposed by Eversource and the electrical codes. Is there some consideration being given to put transformers in the street itself once this work is done, so the people in this area can go ahead and upgrade their service to put in EVs and other electrification facilities?
And I mean, that's a great question, but our focus for utilities is really water and sewer. I'm not even sure who you would speak to. Maybe Somerville Sustainability Office, and see if that's an option. But for this project, that's not something we're going to be focused on.
Okay, so there's nothing in your plans that leave room for that or accommodate room for that type of transformer, as far as you know right now?
No, sir.
Okay,
Correct.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Thank you for the question.
Typically, that's it's not in the city's purview because we don't own the electric lines; they're owned by Eversource. And I don't know if Eversource has plans to make any electrical upgrades in this neighborhood. We can certainly ask and find out and follow up with you. If you're able to email us that question, we can communicate with Eversource and try to get you an answer from them.
Yeah, or connect you to our Office of Sustainability and see if they have
Yes.
more information on that.
Thank you, Jesse.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we've been talking with Eversource, and we just have the ability to put a 400 amp transformer on the poles, and there's one across the street, and there are no more pole transformers allowed, but you have to put it in the ground. So that's the basis of my question. Thank you.
Gotcha. Well, thank you, Ed. Up next is Matthew Lee. Hey, Matthew. Matthew, can you
Matthew,
unmute yourself?
you should be able to go ahead and unmute.
Matthew, you there?
Am I Matthew? No.
Yeah, sorry. That is what your screen says.
Well, this is Jill Hoy. I live in Matthew Lee's building. We're an artist co-op on the corner of Winslow and Clifton. We
Hi,
get
Jill.
waterfalls coming down off the bike path and flooding in our we live in a live work studio spaces, and the flooding in the ground level has been terrible in our building, which we've tried so many things to figure out how to keep it out. But so I'm concerned that the holding tanks on Morrison won't cope with, it seems like Winslow is a little lower than Morrison. I'm not sure that's the case, but I just wanted you to know Winslow is really dealing with a lot of flooding. And I echo Toby and Colleen in the concern about these big, beautiful trees that are all along there that are very important to maintain when you're putting your piping through. Really and also your dry well situation. Please do not disturb those trees, because we're very lucky to have that silver maple and the pines on the corner. They're very important to the whole neighborhood. And yeah, but I really hope you get some good dry wells in that will cope with the runoff from the bike path and also down the hill. I know you're hoping Morrison ones will cope with it, but anyway, it's such an intense problem. I just wanted to revoice that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. You know, we never want to remove a tree. You know, that's never our goal.
I'm sure it's not, but really, it sounds like you have good advice coming in. I just wanted to echo those other voices. They're very important trees.
We appreciate it, Jill. Thank you. Up next is Cassie.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
We can, Cassie.
I might be repeating a little bit because I live on Morrison near where Jill lives. And I was curious because we have that little section of Clifton between Morrison and Winslow is marked as a private road, but I was just wanted to confirm that the city would still be doing infrastructure work on the private roads. And I was curious whether that would extend to what is also a private road, which is that parking lot between Morrison and the bike path. I assume that is a fully private road and that wouldn't be part of the scope. And I think there's another part of a private road, Newburn, which also floods. And I don't know anybody, if anyone from that little spur of Newburn is on the call, but I think they were very eager for this work to be done. And I'm sure they're very happy to hear that it's moving forward. And I should have started by also thanking the city, because we're one of many that have had flooded basements and have been grappling with flooding for a long time. So this is really great news, but I was just curious what the scope would be. And then I also had a question about underground infrastructure in terms of moving utilities underground, but it sounds like that might be outside of what the city can do.
Cassie, I will say this. You're absolutely right. That lower section of Clifton and the lower section of Newburn are both private ways that the city does not own or maintain. Hence why you don't see them in the map. And it's tricky because I believe, given those locations, they're how prone they are to actual flooding. It really kind of emphasizes the work we need to do in the surrounding public streets to help minimize that flooding that those on Lower Clifton and Newburn are experiencing. So while I can't guarantee that any work is going to be done on either Clifton or Newburn, or is that other little section there that I'm
yeah, I think it is Newburn.
It doesn't rule out entirely the fact, there's let me rephrase that. There's a chance we may need to do something with stormwater runoff on those streets, depending on what our modeling says, what our initial design says, how does our work interact with some of these surrounding streets, right? We take that into consideration. We can't solve flooding on one street and push all the flooding to the next. So even, I'm tempted to say, even if we don't perform any utility work there, the effects of everywhere else will be recognized in the sense that it's, the mitigation of flooding on Winslow, Grove, the other Morrison Ave, some of these other side streets is going to help promote and reduce that level of flooding and really promote the drainage in a positive fashion for those private streets.
I can totally accept that. And I actually have another question that I don't know if it's related to this or not, but a number of years ago, we had wildly terrible flooding, like feet in our basement. And obviously the city got lots of calls from a lot of us on Morrison. And since then, the flooding has been quite minimal, at least at our house. We're in the middle, we're in one of the row houses. Was that just clearing out the storm drains that made like the actual, I know that the city actually did open up the street and do a tiny bit of work, but I'm just curious what intervention was done then that made such a difference, because I'm optimistic that this much bigger intervention will really help. But do you know what they did this must have been about 5 or 6 years ago?
I don't know off the top of my head. I could guess, but I might not be right.
Well, it didn't solve everyone's problems, but it solved ours. And so then my other question, and I think a prayer person asked, is there any, since we're going to be opening up the street, presumably completely, I would first put a plug into changing those humps to be a little bit more accessible and a little bit less sharp, because I'm less sympathetic about people's cars getting broken as I am all of us getting woken up by the sound of the cars slamming into them throughout the night. It's really loud. They're, the ones on Powder House are more, I think they still do the same job at slowing traffic, but the ones in Morrison are really weirdly high. And then it would also be amazing if we could get underground, if we could get the utilities underground once the street's opened, but that may be outside of the scope.
Yes, when you say utilities underground, which utilities are you talking about?
I guess I was thinking electric and other, so that the poles would come down. I guess cable, but maybe cable is always above. I don't know.
Sure. So I actually had another meeting last week, and someone asked a very similar question and the answer is, there's a few answers actually. One, the amount of room that's actually in the street. So if we're putting a large culvert as well as water, as well as gas, there really isn't room to then put electric and cable underground as well. We also don't own those poles, as Dan said earlier, and therefore we can't really have Eversource relocate their wires underground. It's incredibly expensive, and they don't want to pay to do it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll look forward. What the next meeting you think is going to be sometime in June?
Ish. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is
Great.
very.
Thank you, Cassie.
Thanks, Cassie. Up next is the real Matthew Lee. Possibly. Matthew there? Matthew, you should be able to unmute yourself. Still not me. Probably someone else from my building. All right. Well, let's go to Mark Robart then. Mark, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. How are you?
I'm well, although I was distressed to hear that New Bern Street, being a private street, isn't being considered for in this plan. But let me just say thank you for this meeting. I live on New Bern Street. I and my neighbors have been contending with flooding for over a decade. We've been talking to the city for 12 years. Because of the particular way in which Newbern Street is a dead end and it has walls on three sides, we don't get ponding. We actually get a pond with sewage and everything that's in sewage being left on the street when the water finally goes down. So I understand these plans are preliminary, but I'd like you to comment on how you believe this is going to remediate the flooding that we continue to be subjected to on Newbern Street.
Well, I think, Mark, one of the biggest takeaways here again is that stormwater inline storage tank on Morrison, right? So a lot of those flows, surface flows that are coming down the street, entering the system, finding their way down to the bottom of Newbern Street at the lowest point, to the point, you know, like as you mentioned, and I certainly believe everything you're saying. You know, when the systems surcharge and the pipes overflow and they find their way back up to surface level right there at the bottom of Newbern, by having this inline storage tank on Morrison, it's going to capture a lot of those flows before they get to your part of the street, essentially. So by storing all that water, you know, kind of uphill, right? The tank's going to be underground, but it's going to capture a lot of those flows coming down, even from way up the top of the hill as you get closer to the Brown School. All that stormwater has to go somewhere. Usually enters the pipes, makes its way down to you, and creates a backup. By putting a tank, kind of, you know, this physical tank in the ground just north of you on Morrison is going to capture those flows certainly much better than what you're experiencing now and what you've experienced for the last 10 years or so. I can't guarantee that we're going to completely eliminate flooding in this neighborhood, but the end result will look a lot different than what it does today. We'll have less basements flooded, less roadway flooding, etc. And that's true for this section of Newbern. That's true for that section of Clifton, even though we may not have actual work on that part of the street, the private ways. But there will be benefits that you as a resident of Newbern are going to see based on the work we're doing, you know, on Morrison and other public streets.
So I have another related question, if I might. The repairs to the drainage system on the bike path, I understand that pipe is fairly significantly collapsed down by Grove Street. And I'm wondering if you've actually mapped the connection between the drainage systems on Newbern Street with that with the drainage on the bike path.
So we haven't yet. Part of our kind of this preliminary design phase that's continuing through this upcoming September 2024. We do have a lot of these utility conflict kind of locations scheduled to be inspected over the next few months. So we're going to be going around, you know, our team here, Kleinfelder, Dewberry, we're going to be popping manholes, checking inverts of pipes, mapping out where the pipes go, how they interact. Are there issues? You know, are there holes? Are there leaks that are going to contribute to more saturated groundwater that's going to rise up, you know, in kind of, how do I say this? Contribute more to that flooding. So short answer is yes, this whole corridor, this whole neighborhood, we're going to be doing all these utility mappings and inspections to kind of figure out exactly, you know, what is the current condition, how does it interact with one another, and you know, where are the big problems that we need to focus on, you know, with a certain set of tools versus elsewhere. You know, Harvard Road may see different quote unquote prescription for its utilities than Morrison at Newbern, for instance. But we are going to, sorry, go ahead.
No, I appreciate that you're in a very preliminary process or phase of the project, that there'll be a lot of opportunity to interact with members of the project team. I just really want to appeal to you and the others that because of the particular, again, a dead end street, walls on three sides, the water has nowhere to go. And the lowest portion of the street is actually the garage in the building I live in. And there have been times when we've had up to 21 inches of water in a garage that has space for many, many cars. So you can appreciate how much water we're actually talking about.
21 inches. Yeah, that's quite a bit. That is a lot. And
Yeah,
this is good feedback, right? This is part of the reason why we have these meetings, so we can hear from you all and understand, what are your lived experiences that we can draw from and remember
Well,
as we continue our design with the intent of, mitigating, right? So this,
happy to send photographs.
please do. We could certainly use them.
Great, thanks.
Great. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. And we'll move on now to Mary. Mary, you should be able to unmute yourself. Hey, Mary.
Hi, can you hear me now?
We can.
Oh, excellent. So I live on Winslow, and one of my neighbors who may have been born in her house said as a child she remembers going down Winslow Avenue in a rowboat. and then I heard that there's a Miller River that might be somewhere below the area. I asked Jack Connolly about it, former alderman, lives on Winslow. He said he thinks that they diverted water when they put the red line in somehow. But when you look at realtor.com, Winslow, parts of Winslow, a little bit in front of my house, come up purple in terms of potential flooding, long-term flooding. And if there's a river, and if you look at old maps of Somerville, I've tried to look this up, and there was a Miller River at some point. And water likes to go where water likes to go. So it sounds like this project is really kind of focusing on runoff, which is great. And you guys are fantastic. It's been a great meeting and so forth. But I guess what I'm wondering is if there is a river and it was diverted, but water likes to go where water likes to go, how does that fit into all of this? And I may be completely wrong on this, but she did say she remembers going down the street in a rowboat when there was a big flood.
Sure, Mary, thank you. First and foremost, you're absolutely right. There used to be a Miller's River in the city of Somerville. It was most predominant down in the Union Square area. And one thing I do want to point out that I'm going to reference that Somerville Ave project down by Union Square because it's very similar to the same situation we see with Morrison and Winslow here. So Union Square and Somerville Ave is more or less sits directly above what used to be the Miller's River. What, Jesse, 10 years ago, flooding, is up halfway up car doors down in Union Square.
I lived there. It was 2011.
2011. So 13 years ago.
Really? Yeah.
That whole neighborhood was inundated with floods. Same thing. People are out with canoes and kayaks in the street. And I reference this because what we did on Somerville Ave is the same thing we're looking at doing here, putting in a giant stormwater storage tank. What contributes to increased groundwater is surface runoff. When we have clay-like soils that aren't very permeable by water, water tends to sit on top of clay. And when we get these high-intensity rainstorms, anywhere that's permeable, lawns, gardens, things like that, impervious pavements is more or less contributing to the issue where it's sending all this stormwater to a point where it infiltrates into the ground and that groundwater table rises up. So what it sounds like, and I can do more research and follow up with you later. If you'd like to email me, please do. In some of these areas where we filled in these natural bodies of water 100+ years ago, we use very poor soil. That's how you get this clay layer. Water sits on top of that. And it's really hard to drain. So we want to focus on the stormwater portion and the runoff portion before that enters into the ground and kind of artificially increases that groundwater level by capturing it in a tank. So going back to Somerville Ave, we put a 14-foot wide by 6-foot tall culvert underground. It's more or less a big tunnel you could drive a car through. That project, for all intents and purposes, was completed about 2.5 years ago, and we haven't had any major flooding down there since, because the infrastructure we installed is actually working. So that's the same sort of ambition and mindset that I have approaching, coming into this project is, yes, this area is prone to flooding. Yes, a lot of this area is fill, poor fill. The groundwater table is so high. You see a lot of impervious areas, driveways, rooftops, things like that, that are all kind of exacerbating this issue. So by attacking, I don't want to say attack, by addressing really, what's the root cause? What's the common cause of all this? And it's, it's more rainstorms, heavier rains, short periods of time that are going to really, lend themselves to increased flooding. We can mitigate a lot of that so that your neighbors, future residents of this neighborhood don't have to get a boat out to go down Winslow Ave.
And just to add on to what Dan was saying, is that, I'm a little cocky about this. We're the team that kind of slayed the dragon on Somerville Ave for the long-term flooding. And now we're coming to your neighborhood to do the same thing. So we're here, guys. We're here to take care of this. All right, well, thank you, Mary. Let's go to Vince Lynch. That's a fun name to say.
Yes.
Vince, you should be. Hey, Vince.
Yep. Hello.
Hey, Vince, how are you?
Good, thank you. My neighbor Mark, I live on New Bern Street. My neighbor Mark laid out many of the issues that were of concern to me. Just to add a couple things to provide feedback to you folks in terms of the past history of flooding. We in our building had to absorb a tremendous amount of cost to make corrections after some of the earlier flooding, one of which included I believe it was a $21,000 cleaning and repair bill for drywall that needed to be replaced and everything. So it was a huge expenditure. And we also installed a pumping system, which was considerably expensive as well. So indeed, it's just, we're running short on time. I just want to underscore what Mark said and share my concern that it sounded like New Bern might get kind of the short end of the stick on some of the work, and I'm hopeful that will not be the case, because we've all suffered down this end of the neighborhood quite significantly time after time. So thank you for the meeting tonight, and look forward to future contacts.
Excellent, Vince. Thank you for being here. It is almost 7:30. We will have time for one more question. Actually, I don't see any hands raised. If anyone wants to get their last question in, now is the time. Dan Schultz, you had your hand raised before. Hey, Dan.
First of all, thank you and the two other guys for being here tonight. It's a bit of a disappointment that none of our elected members were able to attend tonight, but
we actually, Dan, I just want to add to that. There's another meeting happening just at the exact same time. I think it's building committee maintenance meeting, talking about the future of the schools, and a lot of them are on that committee. And we're
I totally get that. I'm actually coming in from the Caribbean, so I made it a point to be on tonight. But regardless, thank you for being here tonight. A few of my questions are, and I live with Vince and Mark. So if New Bern's not on the list of projects that are going to be included in this, I think it's important that the next time there's a heavy rainfall that you and other members of the town come down and just see the flooding, because it's pretty bad. And I think that's important for you guys to address. But my questions here are this. First of all, when do you expect the project to be completed?
Too early to tell, Dan. I mean, we're anticipating a summer 2026 start, but until we have a full design, and we couldn't even predict that after a preliminary design.
Okay.
So
are the resources already allocated for the project? And if not, is the city going to change their mind on this?
We do have resources more or less committed to the design. We have resources committed to the construction. because we don't have a full design, we can't really estimate what the final construction dollar amount will be. So will the city go back on this? Unlikely.
Okay.
Are we going to need to, really analyze and be cost efficient, cost conscious? Yes.
Okay. The other thing is, why is it taking 2 years to start the project? I mean, I'm in business. I deal with a lot of consultants. It seems like a long time for us to have to wait for something to be done.
It's a good question. There's a lot that goes into it, I guess. Let me start there. So aside from hydraulic modeling, right? We need to collect survey. We need to do home surveys, understand plumbing. We need to get an idea of what the condition of all our infrastructure is. Water, sewer, drain, all the structures that go along with it. We need to analyze what's the condition of other underground infrastructure, fire alarm, gas. I'm sure there's more. Add this in to a very extensive public outreach process. This is meeting one. Likely we have 3 meetings, this being the first, before September of this year. Once we reach preliminary design, so we have a concept, it's another year, 3 more meetings. Things are going to get tweaked. We're contending with a dozen different stakeholder groups. Some people want bike lanes. Some people want all parking, no bike lanes, no sidewalks. So it's really a challenge for us to kind of fast track a design like this, because the city has to perform QA and analyze the construction drawings, the specifications that Kleinfelder and Dewberry are going to help us put together. We hire Kleinfelder and Dewberry to put these plans together for us so we can review them. Do they make sense? Do they work for the fire department? Do they work for the police? Do they work for Cataldo? Do they work for the neighborhood? Are we protecting trees? What's our green stormwater infrastructure look like? So as you can tell, there's a lot of different things to contend with, and some things are going to be conflicting with others, right? Say we want to upgrade a new water main, where's it going to go? Do we have space in the road? And it's constant checking. So really, in my mind, 2 years is a pretty quick turnaround before construction starts.
And that's our standard, by the way, as well.
Okay. We're used to seeing 3, 4, 5 years of design before shovel even hits the ground.
I agree with that, and maybe in the private sector it's a little bit different. My next question is, what exactly are you going to do with the bike path during the construction? Because there's a lot of people that go through the bike path to get to the T. What is that going to be first priority to get those people to be able to commute on a regular basis? What's the thought process there?
We would create a detour around it. But once again, we are still very much in the design of this. And, once we actually go to construction, our contract will create traffic management plans showing how pedestrians get from A to B.
Okay. So what's the committee that you guys have put together for residents to be on to make some decisions in this process? Because it's not just a citywide decision. There's a lot of people that are impacted by this, and I think you need constituents to be able to make some of these decisions. What's the process there?
Oh, absolutely. And again, it's a handful of different methods, a whole suite of options we have. Internally with this team, we've talked about doing a block walk with residents. We'll walk up and down the street, point out things of concern. We plan to perform surveys, polls, pull people to our website.
Set up a table right on the bike path. There are multiple ways to get feedback. This is meeting number 1. We had 40 people here. We're not having 40 people decide how we're going to redo the neighborhood. We're going to be interacting with the whole neighborhood through the next 2 years to get this process going.
Yeah, and my last question, just given the time, and I know people have carved out some time this evening, is what are we paying the consultants for their work on this project?
In terms of dollars?
Yeah, I know there's either a set fee or there's an hourly rate. What are we paying the consultants for their work in this project?
I believe it's an hourly rate, but if you could email me, I don't have the number off the top of my head, Dan, I apologize. But if you want to email me, I can get you that information.
Yeah, I think that the city should be transparent about what resources are going into this project, given how much the impact has affected the residents, and the city is now doing something about this. So I think maybe as a recap for those people that are on this call, I can send an email and you can respond to everybody just so we know.
That'd be great.
Okay.
We do.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, we'll do one last question. And will Toby, you have your hand raised again?
All right, you ready?
Just a quickie, and I was just going to send Dan an email about this. To follow up on the suggestion of rowboat coming down Winslow Avenue, I would suggest that part of your analysis look for the groundwater level under Winslow Avenue. We have sump pumps in our basement, which go pretty much all the time. And so it may be that we're actually almost at or below the groundwater level. So I would recommend that you do boreholes to find out where that water level is.
Sure. Yep. That's actually part of our plan, Toby. We've got a slate of I'll call them borings. I was going to say soil borings, but you know, we core out sections of the road kind of in a random pattern, maybe not so random pattern, up Morrison, up Winslow. And during that process, you know, the drilling company that's typically performing the work makes note of where they encounter groundwater. So we will have that information available to us.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you all.
And I will say, as a former resident of Foskett Street, we had a sump in our basement that ran all the time as well.
All right, well, that brings us to a little past 7:30. Thank you all for attending. Like we said, look forward to this being posted on our website, as well as future meetings and opportunities to speak to the team. Those are our email addresses. Shoot us an email with any questions. And that is it. I leave you with Go Celtics. Have a great night, everyone.
Great. Thank you all.